designed by someone who's a designer and who has passion for data, you end up seeing like so many problems that exist. Level of opportunities that I will be able to get here was vastly different from what I was exposed to earlier.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Design Head podcast. I know it's been a while, but to be honest, it's been struggling a lot. But currently, I'm in Canada and I have been doing my first podcast here. But the amazing thing is, today we have a really amazing guest, and I think this is our 52nd or 51st podcast. To be honest, I don't remember, but you will see it on the titles. But today we have Ridhima with us. She's a lead product designer at Databricks, and we're going to talk about her journey, how she has grown to the place where she is and what are her experiences, and we're going to talk too deep into it. So let's invite her on the stage and we'll go about it. Hey Ridhima, how are you doing?
Hey, Abhay. Doing great. How are you?
Doing great. Let's start with an introduction of yours for the audience out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Ridhima, as you mentioned, currently work at Databricks, and I work in their machine learning team. So I design tools for helping other data scientists do machine learning and build AI apps. Super interesting space right now. I'm really enjoying myself in that area. But again, before Databricks, I worked at Amazon for a little bit and also worked at this company called Tableau, which was which a lot of the data science nerds probably or data analyst nerds kind of know about. It's a tool for data visualization, and it was one of my dream companies when I was in grad school to kind of work there. Because data visualization was an interest that I developed in grad school. Worked on a lot of projects there. And before Tableau, I actually worked at this company called Juniper Networks in the Bay Area for a little bit. Again, a very totally different domain than what I had envisioned myself working in. But honestly, it ended up being like one of the most rewarding times of my career where I learned quite a bit about myself as a person and myself as a designer as well. But yeah, I think like to in short, I would say my journey in design kind of started with architecture. So I went to architecture school in India, and from there I kind of transitioned into UX. We can go into the reasons for all of that later as well. And in 2014 is when I decided to kind of apply for master's programs in HCI, and I came to the US at Georgia Tech's HCI program. And yeah, since then, I've been practicing as a professional UX designer, working in different domains, and yeah, it's been a hell of a ride so far.
That's interesting to know. But I'm really interested by like you went to IIT Roorkee and obviously it's a good school. So you did your architecture. Like what led you to like UX? Like did you already decided before coming to the US that you wanna like get into it? How that like spark happened?
Yeah. So it was a very interesting journey. So when I went into architecture school, I was actually enjoying architecture quite a bit. Like the first 2 years, I was exposed to a new domain altogether because growing up in India, you're basically trained your life to study engineering. All of my entire family was a family of engineers as well. But I was like exposed to this new world of design and actually thinking creatively about things. So it was very intriguing for me. But I think the challenge was when I was working so I did a couple of internships during the first 2 years of my undergrad. And I started to realize that I didn't particularly like the professional working environment of architects. And nothing against architects in general, but it was just not the right fit for me in the sense that, um, I think there wasn't a lot of career stability in general, which I did not particularly like. And the other option that I had in front of me was to kind of start my own architecture practice, which was also like something that I I wasn't ready to do it at that point in my life, so that's kind of when I was starting to look at, okay, what other career options do I have. I still wanted to be in design, and that's when I had started talking to this senior of mine. He was 2 years ahead of me. He had graduated by that time, and he was like a really good designer, even in like architecture school, and everyone respected him. So I reached out to him, and I kind of found out about this field called HCI. It's, excuse me, HCI through him. And he was like, hey, like, you should look into this. This is actually very similar to architecture, and you can like transition more linearly into this field as well. And your skills will get transferred as well. So you won't like lose what you've learned so far. And so I kind of like started exploring that. Um, there was an also like a mobile app that a couple of friends and myself we developed to kind of get our hands dirty with HCI, and it actually kind of felt very natural to us. And we were all architecture students. We ended up designing this like diary keeping app in undergrad, and this was in 2012 when mobile smartphones had just started coming out, and mobile apps were the rage at that time. And we were very excited because that project got featured very well across the world. It got featured in like top 10 apps in the productivity category at that time. And, it was a big deal for us that, oh, this small, tiny project that we did ended up getting recognized around the world, which was amazing. Um, and so I thought, okay, this is intriguing. And that's when I also, so in architecture school in India, at least in Roorkee, it was the case that your last semester, you could do a co op with another firm. So I had like this 6 month period where I could like test waters if I actually like working in a professional environment as a UX professional. And so I had joined this design agency called Design for Use in Gurgaon during those 6 months. And I have to say to you, like, that period was a transformative time for me. Like, I met some of the coolest people I know today over there, and I really enjoyed like the work that we did as well. I was like working with clients directly. I was testing mobile apps and like websites every day. We were like sharing inspiration to each other. And so I think that kind of gave me the inspiration that, hey, I think I feel I'm a natural fit for this. I do feel I have natural skill set in this area, and I was actually enjoying myself doing the work as well. So yeah, I guess that's when I decided, all right, I'm gonna pursue this field a little bit more formally. And Yeah, that's when I decided to like kind of apply to the schools in the US. I was also exploring the IDC program at IIT Bombay. Actually went there for a workshop as well, and that program seemed really nice as well. But yeah, I wanted to kind of explore something outside of India as well, and that's why I decided to apply to US universities at that time.
Makes sense, makes sense. But why not go through the route of like going into the industry? Because I know a lot of
Yeah,
designers do this itself. Like after
yeah,
whatever they do, architecture, design, marketing, whatever, like they generally try to uh, learn self-taught themselves and then eventually get into the industry. Like why not go through that route and go through the formal education route?
yeah. That's a great question. Actually, if I were to look back, I would have probably done that, because I think if you go in the industry, you kind of understand more deeply about what you like, what you don't like, and you can then even when you do a master's later on, you can then tailor your program specifically on areas that you're interested to learn more about. I think at that time it was more around, I think that there was definitely some perception in my mind that I didn't want to stay in India um, for some time. Some of it had to do with like some influence I had with doing some international internships during undergrad, which kind of, I guess, created a bias in my mind that I wanted to not stay there. And so I would say that was the bigger motivator. But when I compare myself to people like who actually had work experience in the industry before, I think that is definitely valuable. Like it's the same where you do an MBA right after undergrad and you just don't have any professional experience to base that learning off. You learn stuff, but you don't know where to apply it or how useful it will be almost immediately. So I think in hindsight, I would have perhaps at least spent another year or two in the industry and then made a choice from there.
Sounds interesting, and that makes sense a lot because a lot of people uh, generally try to, because it's also experience, right? You don't just go out to, like, obviously you're spending so much, so it's not about the education. You can still get it online or you can still get it like somewhere else,
Right.
uh, but definitely makes sense to have that formal education, and is a route to explore more opportunities which might be constrained with where you are. But that really helps because that gives you that exposure to learn, and I think as a designer, getting as much diversification, that is best, as good as you can go. That
Yeah.
makes sense. But then you came here. How did you felt like with Georgia Tech? Uh, like how was your education? Because you did explore some waters in India as well. Like, so what did you feel with formal education here?
Yeah. So actually, I got very surprised when I came here in the sense that I kind of expected. So, one was that, there was a lot of practical learning that was happening here, which was something that being Indian students we aren't exposed to as much. So that was love that experience that can do that. But I think the biggest thing that I found was the kind of, that I found very interesting was the kind of research that was going in the university. So at Georgia Tech there were several labs doing amazing research around accessibility, VR, gaming, just in general, like design for equity, design for like there was a brain human this was a brain interaction lab. There was a ubicomp, like ubiquitous computing lab as well. So there were like very diverse research that was going on in the field of design and computing in general, which just kind of blew my mind in the first 2 months. I was like, wow, I did not even know this world kind of exists. And there's so much research going on there. And, I was right there in the middle of interacting with these world class experts in these areas who are like, if you Google them, they are like super famous people, like experts in these areas. And I had quick access to them. They were just an email away or like a hallway away to kind of, talk to them. So I felt like that environment itself, again, to your point about unlocking opportunities, I immediately kind of felt that, okay, the level of opportunities that I will be able to get here was vastly different from what I was exposed to earlier. um, and then again, like I ended up getting super interested in research. I joined a research lab. I worked there for 2 years, and I was doing published research papers. I was doing a lot of hands-on research. So in one of my research labs, we actually started building a game for teaching quantum mechanics to undergraduate and high school students. And so it was a very interdisciplinary kind of environment where we had like professors from the electrical engineering department, professors from the design department, students from computer science, design, sound design, like all of us coming together to design something. And it was like, a really, I would say, definitely exposed me to the depth and the breadth of the world of design. Whereas in my previous experience, I felt like what I was exposed to was, okay, UX was about research and, making things, making wireframes and making the user experience, like making prototypes and like doing research and like that was the extent of what I was exposed to. um, but I think it was a very humbling experience for me as well, that okay, I don't know so much in this area as well. And I think it definitely opened a lot of doors, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the professors, and the connections that I made at Georgia Tech still come in handy for me. So um, yeah, I think that was like the first initial impressions there. there.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. And is it what you say, that curiosity, that, or like that, these experiences or exposure that led you to that, because I know you already told me that you got more into the data visualization side, and
Yeah,
that what's like peculiar interest. So do you
yeah,
think that this curiosity and exposure was like is one of the factors that led you to that? Because if you
yeah,
think generally as a UX designer, if you go to India and ask like, you want to do UX design, what you will do, and people will be like, yeah, I want to design apps, like, or websites or something like that, right? It won't be like, I want to get into more data visualization or something like that, because that's, I know, because of the factor of my influence with the people I have around it with, that data, big data, generally these things are pretty, at that time, I know 2014, 16, it's like were pretty common or pretty uh, exposed, or like pretty, I will say, booming in US specifically when anybody was going to masters. uh,
mm,
so but you choosing to have the mix of like, you like purely focus on UX and then choosing data, that is really curious. So that I want to know, like, how did that specific niche came into your mind?
yeah. That's a very good question, actually. So again, kind of got exposed to it at Georgia Tech as well. So there was this professor, John Stasko, who is considered the world expert in the field of data visualization. And he used to teach at Georgia Tech this course for data visualization, which was like intro to data viz. And they would like teach you they would ask you to like create a project, choose a data set, create a project. And it was usually a collab between like computer science and design students. um, so I knew about this course. For some reason, I never got a chance to take the course. Like one time I was going to take the course and I have, that schedule didn't align or whatever, and I missed the window to actually take the course myself. But I knew several students who were very close friends of mine who were going through the course themselves. And I got a little bit exposure during that time that, oh, like the kind of interactions, the kind of like working with data is actually very much about design. You're asking questions of the data, and you kind of have to visualize data in a way that actually makes sense to people. It actually sparks curiosity to ask more questions. um, and there's a big overlap in the design discipline in this area. And so it kind of was always there in the back of my mind, that this is an interesting field and I want to explore this more. And so the lab that I was working with in where I was developing this quantum mechanics game, that professor also had another interest in data visualization themselves as well. So they were also doing like projects in that area. So I would observe all the cool projects they are doing, and I was like very fascinated with it. So during the last year, like the second year of my master's project, I thought, okay, I want to explore this further. Let me get my hands dirty in this area. And so I chose my master's project in the data visualization space. So, what I was trying to do was, I was trying to visualize alumni networks of universities so that students can explore like alumni career pathways and like get inspired by them and like connect with them. So that was like the problem statement, that okay, how can we help students connect to alumni? And so it kind of turned into a data visualization problem, and I started like exploring that more. And I think like during that whole year, I got exposed to so much depth about, wow, this is actually not that it actually requires understanding of how data sets work, what like the different like what kind of modalities are available to you to visualize. There are like certain constraints that the data imposes on the design of a visualization or a data product as well. um, and there was a lot of depth in the discipline, like right from the colors you can choose to visualize something, right from like what methods you can use to visualize like a simple, let's say, a time series data set. There are so many ways you can visualize it, and each method evokes a different feeling and evokes a different question that someone can ask, follow up question that someone can ask from it. So ended up like doing that project. I absolutely loved that journey, and that the professor John Stasko, excuse me, that I was referring to earlier, he became one of my advisors for that project as well. And it and yeah, since then I was like, okay, I think this could be a super cool area to continue to explore more. And that's when I discovered Tableau as well during working on that project. And I remember I was like in absolute love with that project, with that product. I was like, this is built for people. This is like designed by someone who's a designer and who has passion for data. And so anyway, I think yeah, I think that's how I kind of got into this space and kind of then started to work towards a niche for myself.
Sounds interesting because, as I said, it's not typical for any designer to like be like, I want to do data viz and UX. So
Yeah,
finding that niche itself is an amazing job, and the journey that you found it well, is really good. And that's what, if you wouldn't have been in Georgia Tech, you wouldn't have been exposed to that, and you wouldn't have figured out there are different pathways that you can take as a UX designer into data viz and everything. So makes a lot of sense. So once you did that, what's after, like what did you how did you got in the industry, like what was your first job, how was your experience of getting that, tell us
yeah,
about it.
yeah. So okay, so my first job, I would say there were like some constraints for like getting a visa that kind of influenced a little bit about the job that I took, the first job that I took. But having said that, I think so. In my second year of Georgia Tech, we all kind of start applying for jobs, and I had just coming came out of an internship program with Bloomberg in New York. Um, and after that, I kind of knew that okay, I don't want to work in the financial industry. That thing was clear to me, and so I did not want to go back to Bloomberg full time. um, and so I actually met I got the opportunity to actually attend this conference called Grace Hopper Conference. It's for women in community in computing, and it's one of the largest like conferences for women in the world. So I got the chance to go there in my second year, and they have like this career fair set up over there, and you have like 100 200 companies coming there, and they've set up booths, and you can like go there and like network with the companies. And so I ended up going there, and I spoke with a bunch of companies, and there was a booth for Juniper Networks, which I, honestly at that point I had heard about them, but I did not necessarily know what they do. But anyway, I ended up going there, and I ended up talking with them, and uh, it turns out they were actually building a UX team from scratch in the company, and they had just hired a VP of design like 2 months ago. And the guy they had hired was like a veteran in the design industry. It's like super well known. I looked him up, and he worked in at Yahoo in the early days, and like really shaped like Yahoo from the ground up. um and so okay, I was like, okay, I mean, it's just kind of non-traditional. I wouldn't never kind of consider a company like Juniper, but it seems like they're trying to invest in design, and the design team is going to be super small. So that's when I kind of made the connection with Juniper during the Grace Hopper conference, and then a week later they invited me for an interview. So I flew down, flew west to Sunnyvale, where their campus was, given on site. And then, like, by the end of my third semester, I had a full time offer from them. So I ended up accepting it at that time because I felt like this could be a good opportunity. And yeah, so and one of the reasons I also accepted was also because I felt that I didn't want to like kind of have any further like visa issues kind of uh, troubling me later on. So it all worked out because they applied for my H1B visa at that time, and I ended up getting it. I was very lucky to get it in the lottery that year as well. um, and then, like, in the last semester of grad school, I just focused on my master's project. So I got a lot of like free time to kind of focus on that in my last semester. So it ended up working out.
Makes a lot of sense. And that thing, just for the people out there, uh, the first time you're going to get the work visa in US, it's really tough, and it's all, not all, but like mostly I will say luck, because it's lottery. So uh, you get it or you don't get it, and you only have, if in case you are in STEM field, you only have 3 years to like 3 times that you can apply, and if you don't get it in those 3 times, like you just go back,
Yes.
to be honest. So in case you want to have more so it's that uncertainty that leads you to decisions, like that does impact the decision for sure. But if yeah, but if you say the company was really good, and that makes sense, like your first experience. So then how did you kind of move, because I know Tableau was your goal, so why and when did you decide that you want to shift to Tableau? And if you can touch upon like what kind of work, because Tableau I know is like a proper like database, so like you would be able to tell us like what exactly, like what kind of work did you do as a designer, so that
Mhm.
that makes sense for people, like what people do in database as a UX designer.
Right, right, definitely. So Tableau was a very interesting place. So when I joined Tableau after Juniper, so I'll just like briefly talk a little bit about that transition from Juniper to Tableau as well. So I absolutely enjoyed my time at Juniper. Ended up working on a very interesting project there. Um, but at some point, I think I started to feel a little bit discontent in the sense that the company was, again, it's a very technical, like hardware oriented company. And even though they were trying to establish design, there were certain still challenges of like collaborating with stakeholders, right? So I kind of felt that okay, if I want to grow my career more, I needed to kind of, I felt at that time that I wanted to work in a place that had a slightly bigger design team, and the also like the company itself has more design consciousness, and they're aware of the importance of design, and it's like easier to collaborate with people as well. So that's when I applied to Tableau among other companies, and I ended up getting the role at Tableau and immediately jumped at it. Like, okay, stream company, gonna work there. So when I joined Tableau, they were actually, so Tableau had like two major products. So one is the main tool where it's basically the canvas where you draw visualizations in Tableau. So that's like one part. And there's a separate tool which is about consuming the visualizations, and that has its own set of complexities as well. But when I got hired, I was working on the consumption experience of visualizations. So one of my first projects was actually a very interesting problem, which was around having conversations on data that's dynamic in nature. So imagine that you have created a business dashboard, or someone has created a business dashboards, and you are consuming it, but you were having conversation on that data that was like 3 months old, but now the data has changed. So what is the nature of the conversation now? How does the conversation evolve? So it was a very interesting problem, and so I started working on that initially. And we ended up actually creating some very unique paradigms there of like how like how people kind of preserve the context of the data when they are having that conversation, so that when they go back to that conversation they can still see a snapshot of that data in that time. So it could like go back in time and like tell you, okay, this was the data that you were seeing at that time and this is the conversation now at that time. So that was like the first like testing the waters at Tableau. Got me the first 6 months were there. And then so over time I was there for 4 years. Over time I actually started working on like several areas again in the consumption experience, because one of the business challenges that Tableau was facing at that time was not the creation piece. I think they had nailed the creation piece already, and the consumption piece was there. The business was struggling a little bit, that they needed more people to actually be able to consume these visualizations, because that was the business driver. That was the where the revenue was coming from, because people who are creating visualizations is only 1%, let's say, of the people, but the consumption is like much more, right? So over the 4 years I actually started working on like several features on the consumption experience. So like there was this believe it or not, like there was like some of the fundamental features about consumption that were missing. So like Tableau did not have a notifications platform at that time. So like people didn't get notifications if like you're having conversations, right? So I led a whole effort around that. But then we ended up doing a whole redesign that was almost a 2 year project, a whole redesign of the whole consumption experience of Tableau. So the way I like to describe it is it's like Google Drive for visualizations. So it was a lot of content management design, but at the same time, the where it kind of overlapped with the visualization piece was the people who are consuming the visualizations are also could also go in and interact with all these visualizations. So they would like still be able to interact with them, add comments, be able to set specific filters, save them, and like share specific views of the dashboard with someone else. Or they want to like understand, okay, what is the underlying data that was used to create this visualization? How fresh is the data? Can I trust this data? Who created this data? Where is it coming from? Like there's a lot of interesting questions that I was working on. And then I think over the course of 4 years, I ended up like in the last year, I was basically leading most of the design for the whole consumption product itself. So it ended up becoming like a very rewarding journey for me. So yeah, it wasn't like into the direct visualization space, but kind of the periphery of the whole thing that surrounds creating visualizations. That's where I was working on at Tableau.
That's really creative uh, because obviously it fills in the gap of your love for data viz, and does also uh, like lets you have that UX or like user centric side of things, which is really great, to be honest. uh, and uh, and I think Tableau for you specifically, as I can see, has been like a really pivotal role, because that's where you grew the most and you stayed the most till now. So obviously the learning experience would be like a spike, and I think that's where you would have explored database to the fullest. That collaboration, that's interesting. Then why shift to Amazon? Did you wanted to explore something else, or like how did that happen?
That's a great question. So, so after 4 years at Tableau, I felt that okay, I am like exposed as a space quite a lot. There was, sometimes you feel saturation with a space as well, and I wanted a little bit of a change. So I was kind of thinking, okay, what do I want to do next? Do I want to continue in this space further, or do I want to explore a new domain? So at that point, my thinking was, okay, I've not worked in a consumer facing product before. So let me try and see like what that is like. because I felt like I was getting some of my skills around the polish, etc., were I felt were getting a little bit, but not getting as used in my day-to-day work, because you're in the enterprise design world, right? So um, so I wanted to explore the consumer space, and I interviewed with a bunch of like companies at that time, and I ended up taking the role at Amazon, which was and this was a team called the delivery experience team. Dex was what they were called. And basically the goal there, the team was working on like, okay, what, so right after you uh, it was everything from like seeing all the delivery information when you go to Amazon, right? So you see, okay, it's you're gonna get this by this date, and get it by today, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. or whatever. Like right from that information to all the way until checkout was something that this team kind of took care of. Um, and so I kind of felt that, okay, this could be interesting to kind of explore the space a little bit further. But I think I didn't particularly enjoy the like working in a very well established consumer space. I think if I had worked in a startup in the consumer space, for example, probably I would have had a different experience. But lesson learned for me that well established products, you're mostly making a lot of the work was about like micro improvements to the existing system, because of course you can't make big changes, and running a lot of A/B tests and everything. So I quickly realized, okay, I don't think I'm enjoying it as much. And so that's when I started thinking, okay, I actually think I like the complexity and the kind of like workflows that you kind of have to think about in the enterprise space. And I wanted to go back, and um, that's when I kind of got exposed to Databricks as well, and I decided to move back to the enterprise space.
That's great because that's what I wanted to know. Because I feel in the similar zones, but I have not been to like a big consumer first or like tech first like product first company. But
Yeah,
that's what my assumption and learning has been from a lot of people experience that I've heard, that uh, there are some people who I don't know, I will just say, who are made for startup culture, like a fast paced culture, or like a ownership kind of culture. Because when you are in those kind of spaces, you like, I would say, you like own, you feel that ownership or responsibility towards that thing that you're building.
yeah,
And I don't know, that's again my opinion, is that people, like as a designer, you feel more responsible, you design much better as taken care of that. Because I know even when you are working in like a big firm or like company, it's like there's approval processes, there's a lot of uh, SOPs that you have to follow, uh,
yeah,
or like it doesn't work that way, so like, it doesn't work without it. So uh, it's really creative to know that commonality between a lot of people who have worked around those spaces, which makes sense a lot. So yeah, Databricks. So now what you do at Databricks, and how have been your experience so far?
yeah. So honestly, Databricks has been an amazing journey so far. It has been far more rewarding than what I had imagined as well. So when I interviewed at Databricks, they were looking for someone to own the machine learning platform that they have. So for like Databricks is basically like a platform for data and AI, where you can like work with your data, ingest data to create visualizations, run queries, and you can also create AI models in the platform itself. So my team was focused on the AI piece. And when I was interviewing with Databricks, I did not have a lot of experience in the machine learning AI domain. And interestingly, of course, like there is such a huge overlap, right, in the data world in these spaces. So I was interviewing them, and I think they took a chance on me as well because like they needed someone who can like come in and own a lot of the design work really quickly. But I did not have the experience, but they still took a chance, and I ended up joining this team, which actually has created like this tool for machine learning model tracking. So without going into too much details, it's basically a way. It's also like a visualization tool that we are building. So it's actually a way where people can visualize various multiple machine learning models that they are training and compare them and try to figure out which model is actually performing the best. um, so that's like one of the areas that I've been working on at Databricks for the last couple of for the last like year, and there are other parts as well. But I think the great thing that I like about Databricks is, one, of course, it's a smaller company. So when I say smaller, like the company itself is like 6,000 employees, which is like a really huge number now. And I joined like, I would say, a year and a half ago. And it's very interesting, like almost 40% of the company has joined after me. So so there's an internal stat that you can see when you click on anyone's name, which is very crazy, like the kind of growth that the company is having. But at the same time, the machine learning platform team that I work in is basically 100 people. So it still operates as a very like it still operates like a startup, very much. And our teams are like shipping every 2 months. We are shipping something. Of course, there are small releases here and there, but um, the company is very fast. The team ships very fast, and it's been very rewarding. And I think, lucky for me, it kind of came at a very opportune time as well, because I kind of got into this space. I went super deep into learning about the domain. I was like taking Coursera courses. I was watching like a lot of YouTube videos. I was building machine learning models by myself as well, to kind of learn, okay, what does this process entail. And I ended up like exploring a lot of this space. And then, of course, GPT kind of came out last year in December, and that led to a whole like separate journey of discovery about LLMs. And our team actually is building a lot of tools for like working with LLMs right now. So I'm getting to like experience firsthand the all the updates that are coming in this space, and like all the innovations that are happening in this space as well. So it has definitely been I've been very fortunate to kind of work in this team at Databricks.
That sounds really fun, to be honest, because working in specifically the fields that are growing right now
Yeah.
uh, seems really interesting, curious. What you want to say about, like, it just people, uh, this is what is booming, right? And it's really, like, at least we as consumers see it from the outside, but when people are working, they know how crazy it is, and how creative it is to kind of explore these new innovative fields, which is really fun, to be honest. So now that you have done so much, you, like, obviously you have been working for quite a while now, you have done your formal education and everything. So uh, been in the position that you are now, what would you say is next for you? Like,
Hmm.
what's, yeah,
Yeah.
I will leave it
That's
to
a
that.
great
Yeah.
question. And I ask myself that too. Like, what's next? Um, I think at some point in the next few years, I do see myself either working for a very small startup, or like doing, starting a startup by myself. Because I do think that at some point, once you've gotten experience, once you kind of have the knowledge in a particular domain, you see end up seeing like so many problems that exist, and you either want to solve them yourself, and you can like kind of see business opportunities emerging in these areas once you are deep in a particular area, um, and without like kind of feeling constrained, having the constraints of a big organization. Of course, that I'm sure it comes with its own set of challenges, right? Like it's not very easy to work in a small setup as well because of the uncertainty and like a lot of long hours and everything as well. But I think I do want to experience that. I do feel that um, I am ambitious that way, and I want to like I do see myself like uh, working in a small setup and have that ownership in shaping the design of not only the product but also like the company that you work in, because that materially affects like everything that happens afterwards in the company, the kind of people you hire, the kind of culture you develop. So yeah, no concrete plans as of now, but yeah, that's definitely something that's like I'm like always looking at Y Combinator videos or like kind of figuring out, oh, like how do you, you know, kind of start up or like choose startups to work for as well. And I think like honestly, I think designers are very well positioned to actually lead startups. Now, like tech is so accessible, and I don't know if you saw this talk by Brian Chesky at the Figma conference. I mean, I think it became so famous, right? And he was like, "You guys need to step up. Like, you guys need to take the seat at the table and like own your own things." Um, so that has been inspiring, and he's like definitely a role model that I look up to. And Yeah, so I think yeah, that's probably next step, but no particular timeline for that right now.
Makes sense. And obviously, what you just said really is on point, because if you see Airbnb as a as a startup in its whole, like they have done tremendous. Like I just love. I've read a lot about their business models, how they grew, how they pivoted. Uh, so that's not the Figma talk. I think he gave a TED talk as well, where he
Mm.
talked about what's a 10-star experience.
Oh yes,
Uh,
so
and
famous. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is so great how he, like, it's, I'm not even lying, it's just the mind blowing when you hear that person like speaking
Yeah.
about. And it's not just about Brian, it's about generally designers leading startup.
Right.
uh if you, and you said aptly, like, it's time to step up, and designers are rightly, like, are the correct fit to do it. uh like the perfect fit to do it, because they know the users better than anyone else in the company. In some of the ways it might sound controversial, but that's true. Even better than a CEO as well, like I would say that, because a lot of times they have many more things to look upon, but as a designer you are more focused on like users, their behaviors, and how your design decisions does impact the business as well.
Okay.
Right. So that's really interesting take, and how designers would grow. I'm really looking forward to having more design startups so that I can work some in some of them and eventually have one of my own. But
Yes.
that's crazy to look upon. That's interesting. Interesting take. Amazing. So we'll go to the next round, and that's, I told you, it's a fun thing that we do, but it's, to be honest, not more fun now. It's like quick questions that we do, not more rapid questions.
Awesome.
So I will throw in some questions. I will leave some space for you to answer. Try to answer in as less words as possible, and
Okay.
whatever your take is on it. Okay.
All right. Let's do it.
So yep. So, what would you say are the key qualities to be a successful UX researcher?
Mm. I would say curiosity, deep thinking, and good communication.
Makes sense. What would you say how a UX designer should stay up to date and with the latest developments that going on in the field?
Hmm. So for that, I would say like take out time every day to kind of browse the internet, like look for inspiration, um, without like it's meaningless exploration, right? Like trying to be aware of what's happening, uh, and observe things. that's happening in your around you. Don't lose that touch as a designer.
Makes sense. What would you say uh, is like how a UX designer can ensure that the whatever research they have found can translate to an actionable design decision?
Hmm. Tied back to like business problems that you're seeing, and share it in a way where like, okay, this is a problem, this is the insight, and share, okay, these are ways in which it could manifest in the product as well.
Makes sense. What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of being a UX designer, and what keeps you motivated in your work?
I think the craft of building something is, I really enjoy it, where you have your soul, I guess, poured into something that you're creating, and you kind of feel that it's mine, and it's out there in the world. So yeah.
That's interesting. Hmm. So the last one is, can you share a memorable project or study that you did as a UX designer and which had a significant impact on a design outcome?
You mean like a UX research study or like a design project? Wasn't sure.
And
Anything.
anything.
Anything. Okay. Um, I think like I would say this was a project at Juniper that I did. So we redesigned how firewall policies get managed, how people manage firewall policies. It was a very, very complex and complicated domain, very complicated user experience, and we simplified it significantly. Like huge improvements in usability and like time taken to complete tasks. So that is one project that I kind of feel very proud of that we ended up shipping.
Sounds creative. Amazing. I just have last quick question before we end the podcast, which I generally ask everyone who comes here. So been in the industry for like 6 7 years now, studying design and like before architecture as well, and both from really great institutes. You would have been with a lot of great designers, experiences and everything else. What would you say if a budding UX what would you say to a budding UX designer that they should keep in mind while getting into the industry or growing into the industry?
Mm. I would say, I think with the changing landscape of UX now, and like like having access to creating mock-ups, is very easy. I think, I honestly think like UX designers should kind of think about gaining experience or gaining skills in other adjacent disciplines of product development. By that I mean like get adept at like coding, as well, and also like hone more of like business skills, because I honestly feel like you can still keep your focus in design, but if you have these more complementary skills, you are a powerhouse in any organization. And then because I do feel like maybe 5 years, 10 years from now, product development, I don't know if we might have such segregated roles for designers, developers, and PMs. I think the roles will evolve, and you might need to know a little bit more outside of the comfort zone of design.
Makes sense, and this is very actionable because I've seen this growth in a lot of designers, uh, at least in India, that uh, having these what you say these special skills. For example, very simple example, uh, with like Framer or Webflow. If you know these tools, it does create some impact when you're applying. And similarly, like I still remember a lot of people created their own website on Webflows as a designer, and they were able to, obviously they have their hand in the field, so they are able to answer. They have more knowledge, more confidence about that speaking about that topic, which does creates a big impact either in interview, either while applying or somewhere for sure. So that makes
To-
sense, 100%.
Totally. And also, I mean,
Yeah,
it improves your craft as well, right? It's like
yeah,
if you're an architect, it's basically learning about the tech building construction techniques of like what actually goes into building something. And the more you know, the better you will be able to design as well. So it just like, yeah, I think that's where I think new designers should invest more time in as well.
yeah. That's a great analogy. That how that helps. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot, Ridhima, for coming in. Thanks a lot for giving your time to the people out there. And I think it's gonna be really lovely for people to know your experiences, your journey. I'm definitely gonna link your socials in the description for anybody who wants to reach out to you for any
Yes.
questions that they have. And I hope people get a lot of insights from you. So thanks a lot for coming in again, giving your time, and thanks a lot everyone who has been watching till the end. And see you guys in the next one.
Yeah. Thanks, Abe. See you.